everyone. Welcome back to the Flag Tags podcast. This is going to be our Valentine's Day episode, and we have Dr. Swift Galan from the neuroscience faculty here to answer a couple questions about hormones and love and Valentine's Day. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me and inviting me to do this.
What type of research do you focus on in your lab here at MUN?
Yeah, in our lab, we tend to focus on how sex hormones in early development shape our brain and influence social and sexual behaviors throughout the lifespan. So we have a few different lines of research, one of which we're looking at where hormones are acting. So we look at which brain regions, as well as non-neural targets of hormones, and how they're shaping the brain and behavior. But we're also interested in applying our findings to a more biomedical research questions. So for example, many neurodevelopmental conditions like autism and ADHD, they're more prevalent in males than in females. Whereas conditions that develop following puberty, so like depression and anxiety, they tend to be higher in females than in males. So this pattern of sex differences suggests that sex hormones are involved because in early development, males are exposed to more sex hormones. And then when females do get exposed to more sex hormones, that's where you start to see that shift in the sex bias of these conditions. So yes, we're interested in studying how sex hormones in early development, as well as later in life, contribute to the risk of developing these sex bias conditions.
That's really interesting. So how did you get interested in endocrinology at the beginning?
Yeah, well, when I first started out in undergrad, that is, I did not know what I wanted to do exactly, but I was interested in clinical psychology. So I was interested in understanding how people think and how our thought processes contribute to our behavior and well-being. But what I ended up finding most interesting in my undergrad courses was neuroscience. So I was much more fascinated with understanding how the brain works. And so I figured this out in my second year. And as I took more specialized courses in third year, I became introduced to different fields, including sex differences in the brain and neuroendocrinology. And I really just found it particularly interesting that sex hormones in early development can shape our brain structure and can have these long-lasting effects throughout our lifespan. And that's when I decided I wanted to pursue graduate school to study how the processes of sexual differentiation shape the brain and behavior. And I've only grown more curious and fascinated by neuroendocrinology the more I learn and study it. So it was a good choice.
Awesome. I think it was a good choice too. I did my honors project with you, so I kind of understand it a little bit better, but I found it super interesting. So is oxytocin considered the love hormone? So I know a lot of people think it is.
Yes, in a way, it is considered to play a role in love, or at least in attachment. But that's not its only role. So, like oxytocin is produced by the hypothalamus and it's then released by the nearby pituitary gland. And in females, oxytocin, one of its primary roles is to trigger labor and the release of breast milk, whereas in males, it helps to move sperm. But yes, oxytocin also is released in high amounts during sex, and it's thought to increase bonding and attachment between sexual and romantic partners. And oxytocin has been associated with increased feelings of like trust and empathy and fidelity. And it can also increase positive communication between partners. It can also help us remember positive relationship events. So you can really see like all these factors that oxytocin is influencing can surely contribute to our feelings of love for our romantic partners. But yes, oxytocin is not just involved in love. So for example, the levels of oxytocin released during sex tends to correlate with orgasm intensity. And so it has a role in sexual pleasure. And oxytocin isn't the only hormone making love feel so good. So you have other hormones like dopamine and such that will make you feel happy when you're with your partner. So it's not all oxytocin, but oxytocin definitely is involved.
It seems like it's a major player in it. So, in terms of the brain, what brain areas are active specifically when you're looking at someone that you're in love with?
Um, so you can, so I guess like that kind of gets into what love is. And so love really is composed of lust, attraction, and attachment. So those are kind of the three basic components that we break love down into when we're trying to study it. And when you take a look at these three different brain regions, or these three different factors of love, different brain regions are involved, but they're certainly overlapping as well. So, um, for example, the hypothalamus is my favorite brain region, and it's certainly involved in sexual behavior in non-human animals, and there is some evidence that it is involved in sexual behavior in humans as well. And it seems that our sex hormones like testosterone and estradiol, they seem to act in these brain regions to increase feelings of lust and sexual desire. On the other hand, attraction, it's also based in the hypothalamus for the most part, and it also uh, is involves other brain regions that are connected, like the ventral tegmental area and the nucleus accumbens. So these are more brain regions that are involved in reward. But there are other brain regions involved as well. So they've done studies, for example, where they show participants images, erotic images, or images of loved ones. And you can see that there is some overlap in these brain regions, but there are some differences as well. So, for example, when participants are exposed to erotic images, it tends to be the ventral striatum that is activated. And this is the same brain region that activates when someone's enjoying food or sex. So it kind of makes sense. And when people are presented with images of people they love, it tends to be the dorsal striatum that activates. And this is more, this brain region has been involved with, associated with addiction. Whereas both erotic images and images of people we love will activate the insula. And this is a brain region involved in translating our emotional feelings into meaning. Or in other words, it's the brain region we think is involved in our self-awareness. So you can see the neural basis of lust, attachment, and attraction. They are all a little bit different, but they're all interconnected brain regions for sure.
Is there any neuronal basis behind the honeymoon period of a relationship?
So really, it's all the same brain regions that are involved with the honeymoon phase, but what tends to differ is the hormones involved. So all the hormones we discussed so far, like testosterone and dopamine and oxytocin, they seem to be high when couples are in the honeymoon phase, and they continue to stick around in long-term relationships when people are still in love, of course. But there's also some endocrine differences. So the big one being our stress hormone, cortisol. So it tends to be higher in the honeymoon phase than later on in long-term relationships. And that's thought to be involved in what's making it feel more exciting. So it's thought that as we become more acclimatized with our partner over time, these endocrine changes will dissipate. But that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. So there is a lot of research to show that couples can maintain some of the honeymoon feelings throughout their relationship by challenging each other with new and exciting activities that they can participate in together. So that can be as simple as, taking a bike ride together or dance classes, or something more exciting like skydiving, but something that elicits, um, some arousal that can keep the honeymoon feelings alive. You said?
Um,
Oh, the phenomenon of love is that
oh,
only seen in humans.
sorry.
So that's debatable, right? And it largely depends on your definition of love. So there are some species that are monogamous and they're pair bonded. Um, One species in particular that is well studied is the prairie vole. And so prairie voles, once they mate, they are bonded and they tend to spend a lifetime, at least a long time, anyways, with their partner. And that's drastically different from a lot of other vole species. So they're often compared to the montane vole, and that's because they're a closely related species of vole, but they differ in that they're polygamous. And so we've learned actually a lot about the role of oxytocin in pair bonding from comparing these two species. So we know that oxytocin is involved in making that pair bond, and you can induce monogamous like pair bonding behavior by increasing oxytocin in part of the striatum, or the basal ganglia regions, the ventral pallidum. So if you consider pair bonding and monogamous breeding as indicators of love, then you could argue that the prairie vole is an example of love in other non-human animals. But like with all animal research, we cannot ask the voles about their feelings, so we'll never really know for certain. But yeah, and another species that may show love that may be a little closer to home than the prairie vole are dogs. So it's interesting in that they tend to show increases in oxytocin when they're with their human parents, especially when they're getting pets and cuddles. So it's interesting. So I like to think that they experience love.
So, what is the difference in terms of hormones and again, and are they seen in similar brain regions or different ones?
Yeah, so yeah, the brain regions tend to overlap, but there are some brain regions that are different, and the hormones acting in them do tend to be a little bit different. So our sex hormones like testosterone and estrogen, they are thought to be more involved in lust. So you may or may not be surprised to know that in both males and females, testosterone is the primary hormone involved in sexual desire, while estrogen plays a smaller role in female sex drive. But yes, these hormones, like we said before, they tend to act in the hypothalamus. Whereas attraction, it tends to be also dependent on the hypothalamus, as well as the connected ventral tegmental area and the nucleus accumbens. But it's attributable more to the release of dopamine within the hypothalamus, so rather than testosterone. And then attachment. So again, when we're talking about love, it's more lust, attraction, and attachment. That's kind of how we break it up. But yeah, when we talk about attachment, there seems to be a role for oxytocin, like we discussed. And so oxytocin is often referred to as our bonding or cuddle hormone. And so together, these hormones tend to act within our hypothalamus and connected brain regions like our basal ganglia and striatum to promote these different feelings attached to love.
That's super cool. So, there's all different types of love, like love for a partner, children, but how about self-love and self-care are super important as well. So, are there hormonal aspects for self-love as well?
Yeah, so self-love and self-care can actually reduce your stress hormones, and they can increase some of the same hormones that make you feel good when you are in love with a partner, including dopamine. So this is why self-care can reduce your chances of developing mood disorders like depression, anxiety. So yes, taking care of yourself, both physically and mentally, can certainly have a positive effect on your endocrinology and your well-being.